I'm gonna say got it. Perfect. Okay, we're recording. Everybody's here. We have a quorum. Richard, hello.
No.
Fantastic. Thanks. Thanks for being here tonight.
Oh, you're
Let's see. And I don't think that everybody's on. Okay, great. So let's bring this meeting to order. 6:02, let's call it. 6:03. And the first order of business is a permit extension. This is for applicants Carolee and Richard Duncan. The location's at 118 Bickford Place, map 45, lot 18, shoreland on Salmon Lake. The purpose is to enclose an existing deck, 10 by 28. It looks like 3,640 cubic feet is what is written. Non-conforming lot and non-conforming structure. So are the Duncans with us?
They are, they're online.
Okay. Hey there. Welcome, Duncans.
You're muted.
And if you're speaking, you're muted, just so you know. Okay. We'll get into this a little bit. So it looks as though from our packet, you probably all have seen that there was a letter that was initially addressed, I think, to Anthony, who then made sure that this was in our business about extending their permit, which was granted last year and expired on 1/7/22. They have described that they've had difficulty or unable to secure a contractor to do the work that was needed. And so on and so forth. So they wish to extend their permit an extra year. So I would, I guess, toss this around to the planning board and I did see, Anthony, your reply to them initially, and I just wanted to sort of make sure we could point to something in the.
Yeah, I'm not sure it really matters, but is this the camp that got approval for an expansion, then they had a fire or something? And then they came back with an amended application, a different application?
I don't remember.
This is on Salmon, right?
Yeah, on Salmon.
But the reasoning is because they haven't been able to secure a contract.
Yeah,
And I'll vouch for that.
yeah.
The people, I mean, I just gave away a job that I was supposed to do last year and they're leaving for the winter again. And I was like, I still can't, I'm still on the same stuff. I still can't get to it. So I can totally vouch for that.
Thanks, Craig. And that makes total sense. That's right in line with everything that I've heard about being able to do it or not. But I would like to make sure we can point to something in an ordinance that somewhere that shows how we can do this. And I think we found a couple of places, I believe, in the ordinance. Yeah, I think, did I initially see it on page 16? Perhaps, I don't know. So this is under D, non-conforming uses, so paragraph 2. I'm not sure if this is applicable, but it says resumption prohibited and blah, blah, blah. It goes on to say on page 16. Let's see. Use except that the planning board may, for good cause shown by the applicant, grant up to a 1-year extension to that time period. Is this the applicable section? Or is there a better
On
section?
page 68.
That was the other place I looked at.
Yeah,
page
yeah,
68.
that's the only thing I
Okay,
was aware of myself, which doesn't really address this situation.
I had thought that in the administration section.
which.
Yeah,
and
which
it's fairly
this
late.
is, well, this is just expiration of permit. But maybe I missed something. I couldn't find any language like in the commercial development review ordinance that says, somebody can request an additional year or something of that nature. This just speaks to the expiration date of 12 months, and then they get another year if they've made a substantial start. But I mean, I think it's appropriate to extend it if we have the authority to do so. I think we just need, the question that comes up is, without any language in the ordinance that I could find, how many times do we do that? You know, is there a limit? Having said that, if we do extend it, I think a couple of conditions might be in order. One of which would be that the conditions that we approved with last time remain in effect,
Set different dates.
and then a different expiration date would be the second. But I
Would
don't
agree.
know, maybe
What you
you can
just
find
read.
something, Rich.
What you just read, that gives us power to extend it, correct?
Well, that's what I was thinking, but I just wanted to make sure to ask
On page
because,
16,
yeah, so where I found on page 16,
Oh, okay.
something, but and it's under on page 16. I wanted to make sure that it was applicable. It's under D, non-conforming uses, and then first paragraph is expansions, and then the second one is called resumption prohibited. So that's the topic of that paragraph, but within that paragraph, it says, let's see. On third line, may not again be devoted to a non-conforming use, except that the planning board may, for good cause shown by the applicant, grant up to a 1-year extension to that time period. So my question to the planning board is this language that we're talking about here, I just cited, is that applicable for this particular situation?
I don't think so.
And on page 68, George is right there. It talked about permit can be extended for 1 month with a substantial start. It's initiated in the first year. That's the only section I see that specifically addresses permits. But I'm like George, if we can in any way legally grant this extension, I think it's appropriate.
To get back to your question, Peter, my reading of that is this is more for when an existing non-conforming use is discontinued,
Yeah.
rather than something that's been permitted and needs additional time.
Be like a
Okay.
gas station in the shoreline zone, closed down for a year. Give that extension of that use.
Okay,
That's not for construction of a new. Or whether it's new construction or addition, expansion.
mhm. So that's a good example. And of course, none of our ordinances were written with the pandemic in mind.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which has
Right.
had an
Yeah.
impact on everything.
That's a good point.
Which
Important one.
I think it's a very important, point in this case. So bearing all that in mind, I guess one question I would have. So Anthony, do you happen to know if there was anything else that would be supportive in terms of like administration or law that would allow us to go forward with a permit extension?
No,
in
I
these?
mean, when this request was made, I was thinking about the commercial development ordinance, which I know has some language in there that allows for the extension of a permit for another year, but that's, I know that, and to answer your question, George, now that's only for one extension, so if you get an extension and you don't substantially start your project within that year, then it expires and you have to reapply if you want that. But that's the only ordinance or language that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I would offer this, based on the very unusual circumstances that we as the nation and state and community have faced with this pandemic has really brought forward a particular set of circumstances that have been made it hard for this applicant to do their work that they intended to do. I guess I would say I would entertain a motion to grant an extension of a year because of the very special circumstances that we're faced with. That would be my take on it.
I'd be willing to make that a motion to that effect, but I think we need to amend the ordinance in the future so that we're doing this properly.
Agreed.
There's other circumstances. I mean, who knows how much longer the pandemic shows no sign of slowing down.
Right.
And who knows what else might happen. I mean, I know from my work at DEP, had to do with the installation of underground storage tanks, but there were times that the contractors were out straight for 3 years. They had 3-year backlogs. We had to give people, we had to get
Right.
authority to allow people more time. So I think we need to do this right.
Yeah.
If we're gonna do it.
I agree.
Even if it's after the fact.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I like the idea of amending the ordinance to have the right language in there for these circumstances, because every other taxpayer in town that would, may take issue with this. We want to make sure we're being
Well,
fair wherever possible.
Yeah, I would guess we would come up against this again.
Mhm.
Some sort of hardship or
Something.
Yeah.
Gotta be a way to.
I mean, clearly this is outside their control.
Mhm.
In fact, I think something similar should be done for the commercial. I've been, Steve mentioned this too, but because of the pandemic, I've been thinking that, there's going to be situations where projects that we've approved are not going to happen in a timely manner because of the lack of contractors or lack of materials like DOT's run into, concrete.
Mhm.
The project down in Portland got delayed because of that.
Right.
And in this case here, my thought is we could fix that quite easily, and I think that it'd be, unless the DEP guidelines have changed, it'd be a little bit less restrictive than because I thought we had what was in there recently, but can simply say permits will expire with 1 year for the date of issuance, and simply say for good cause shown or whatever, we could extend it for another year.
Right. Without substantial.
Right.
Without a
Without a substantial start.
Yeah, right. Because that's the other aspect of this, right? I
Yeah.
think when this was written, the intent was, heck, resources would be a disposal, you could do it. And the only reason why, you want to go for an extension is that you had started something, but then you had to stop for whatever reason. And couldn't complete it at that time. Substantial start would be in your favor until you could extend it.
Yeah, we may have to address the issue of unless the standards have changed
Mhm.
since that permit
Yeah.
was granted. or
That's a
whatever. So,
Good point. Yeah. that's a good
but
point.
anyway, I'm willing to, at this point, whether it's exactly legal or not, to extend the permit.
So I'll make a motion to approve the addition addition request with 2 conditions. The first being all specifications and conditions of the original approval remain in effect. And the second is this permit expires on January 7th, 2023.
Now, do we need to address the issue that the original permit says that these things must be done by June 5th, 2021, and December June 15th, 2021. The conditions that we provided on the permit, they can't possibly meet those 2021s already.
Unless that's something I don't.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
date of
you're
the-
smart enough to look at the minutes.
Yeah. And thank you for providing those too. That's helpful. I think the answer is we need to address dates that were part of the original part. So clearly not the December 3rd thing.
So one has to do with the revegetation of
Yeah,
unvegetated area.
yeah,
I'm not sure why that had to be delayed, but it's a matter of going to Home Depot. stormwater runoff that obviously had to be delayed.
Even the vegetation one, if they haven't done the project, they might not have missed.
Yeah, yeah, maybe the contractor was gonna do that too for him. Yeah, you're right, Rich. So let me amend my. It was June 15th.
2021. I'm noting that they're running into trouble getting contractors. Should we give them a latest date that we think is reasonable in case they, like this one here, although removing the hot tub probably is not an issue, but if it takes them a long time to get the contractor, starts in August, he's not going to need any June 15th date for conservation or meeting their conservation practice for homeowners, because he might not be there yet.
About,
September.
I was gonna say, have all the one same date so that all the conditions, not only remain in effect, but shall be met by January 7th, 2023.
Fine.
That way they have all
Yeah.
summer and all, and spring, summer and fall.
Right.
I remember that it's a 10-foot, it's a small area. It's a 10-foot diameter area where they used to have a hot tub.
Right.
The hot tub isn't even there anymore.
Right.
It's, an hour's worth of work.
Yeah, that, I mean, that's fine.
So we'll keep the same dates on the conditions as with
As a
the
termination
newly,
date,
yeah,
that way it's all one date. Be a little easier to administer.
That
So,
makes
approval with two conditions. The first is all specification and conditions of the original approval remain in effect and shall be met by January 7th, 2023. And the second is this permit expires on January 7th, 2023.
thank you, George. So we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Well, can I say something before we go on vote?
Sure.
Since quote unquote, we're not covered by the ordinance, should we say that we're doing this under a waiver?
We don't.
No.
have authority to grant
We don't
waivers.
do a waiver.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah.
Forgot about it. Yeah.
Yeah, not under this ordinance.
Okay,
So under the commercial development review ordinance, we do, but not this ordinance. This is a zoning ordinance.
so
Second that motion.
So it's motioned and seconded. Thank you. Any more discussion on this one? This is unusual.
Only to the extent I can't, hard time thinking of 2023.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. I'm still getting used to writing 22. So, okay, so motion on the floor, it's been seconded, no more discussion. So all those in favor, so we'll do a roll call. So Craig in favor? Yes. Sarah,
yes,
George,
Yes.
Rich,
Yes.
and Peter, yes. So that's 5 in favor, none opposed. It has been granted. So thank you very much.
So hopefully we'll remember to amend this ordinance.
Right. That's a good point. And so the Duncans, I hope you can hear me, but this was permitted to be extended to another year. So best wishes with your project going forward. All right, that was that one. Next up, we have old business.
Quick question, Peter.
Yes, sir.
Are they gonna get a letter or what are they gonna get?
Yeah, I was just writing down, I'll get with Richard next week and we'll make sure we get a letter out. to them.
Okay, excellent.
thank you.
That we will have documentation in the project file too.
Right, that'd be good. Thanks, good point. Great point, great question. Next up is old business, the discussion and consideration of the commercial development review ordinance amendments addressing the commercial solar and wind facilities and telecommunications towers. So, Anthony, thank you for getting the revised thing to the town's attorney so he could provide comment or comments.
The solar first.
Oh, wait,
So,
solar.
George.
Right, so that's under A, right, 2A?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so
Well, I think Peter with 2A, I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that our goal tonight was to listen to some things, some suggestions from Steve,
right,
and then we were gonna start going, just starting at the beginning of the KV cog template and start working through that from the very beginning. We'll get as far as we can in an hour's time. That was the subdivision
okay.
conversation.
Yep, thank you. And Steve, thank you for your patience. I know you attended last time also. And we had a lengthy presentation, which was informative. And I think you have some comments you'd like to share with us tonight, so
Yes,
we welcome them, so.
thank you, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. I thought the best thing to do is perhaps start with what I called attachment B, which was labeled additional requirements discussion documents. First part of it is applicability. What types of projects are you going to be including in the regulations? And I understand that the KV cog recommendation was projects of 100 kilowatts or greater should be included in the applicability section. I had a comment that I really think it's better and more clear to talk about the actual land used by a project rather than 100 kilowatt project, or 200 or whatever number you want to come up with. And I suggest that the new ordinance should include any solar energy facilities that exceed 1/2 of an acre within the facility footprint. That is basically a good rule of thumb is 5 acres per 1,000 kilowatts. So 100 kilowatts would use 1/2 an acre, okay, 1/10. So 1/2 an acre is about the size of a 100 kilowatt facility at this point in time. What's been happening is, and it's even happened in the last 5 years, is that the facilities require less and less land per megawatt of capacity installed. 5 acres per megawatt was a good standard, although many facilities are now down to 4 acres per megawatt. Those are larger facilities. At any rate, the 1/2 acre is equivalent to about 100 kilowatts. I really think that focusing on the acreage, the land, you are generally dealing with land use. I think that's the biggest impact that people see is how big are these things? I suggested 1/2 an acre, and that it's your call as to what you want to use, but I would suggest using acreage rather than kilowatts. The same thing with the language about utility scale. That's a vague, sort of non-technical name. I would rather see you focus on, acreage and just talk about that. At first, I think you were talking about how, this would apply to utility scale. And then I read that, boom, KV cog had a 100 kilowatt recommendation. So I just turned that into land. And,
Okay.
Steve, do you have a suggestion on how that 1/2 acre, or whatever side aerial measurement, if we went that route rather than measuring the output capacity, how that should be measured, because in a lot of different town ordinances, they do it in different ways. They're all over the map. Some do it by the footprint, which they define as the area covered by the panels, and then, you know, the transformer and any structure, other structures. Others do it in sort of a gross, the maximum area, if you put a perimeter around there, all the equipment, it's that area that they regulate by. And one of the reasons, at least up until now, I've been sort of, I found the measurement based on capacity appealing is it's easy to measure. Or
Yeah.
easier than measure and easier to implement than possibly getting bogged down in how do you measure area.
Yeah, well, I would recommend that you use there is a perimeter fence required by the National Electric Code for all of these projects. And so that is the perimeter of the modules, and it's easy to, I mean, that's included in the stormwater plan, you know, it's already part of the permitting process. It's the, I forget what they call it, there's the LOC, the limit of, anyway, the outer perimeter of the fence is what I would suggest. Any project is going to need to come in off the road, you know, with a electric line to the project. The other equipment that's required, some of it is central main power company equipment that really the developer, you know, basically has to go with what CMP wants to do in interconnecting at the road. I noticed that in the Augusta project, there are 3 power poles right near the road. I was surprised by that, but then there's the transformer, the inverter, and the what they call the switch gear, the disconnects and other electrical equipment needed for safety and control, and also for monitoring and communications. These projects generally communicate with a central, you know, office that tracks them and monitors how much power they're producing. You know, identifies problems when they occur, et cetera. So I would say that all of that equipment should not be included in the size, because it does complicate things greatly, and that you should focus on the size of the actual array. The inverter and transformer communications equipment is generally going to be in a module, a metal building or enclosure that is about as big as this table and maybe six or 8 feet wide and 15 feet long. Let's say it's not a large structure.
Yeah. I mean, it's a real fundamental question. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, ask, and I think the answer is probably no, but is there any reasonable possibility that somebody could take this ½ acre and put this high structure panels all the way up 120 feet and do that and get 100 kilowatts of power out of this ½ acre? And what I'm getting at is the ugliness of something that's 120 feet tall, and it's not regulated at all.
Well, I think you should address the height of the facility separately. We talked about that once before. I had suggested 20 feet. You know, most towns have done either 15 or 20 feet. And I think, well, either one of those is.
The only reason I asked the question is if it's exempt at less than an ½ acre, then probably the height standard doesn't
I
come
see.
into play because of that.
I see your point, yeah. Well, I don't know of any equipment like that, but that doesn't mean it'll never be developed either.
Yeah, we have to regulate the likely versus the probable.
Yeah.
One of one of the dilemmas, based on your suggestion, Steve, that we would face is all other developments under this ordinance are defined by every single component right from the roadside.
I see.
So, the transmission will fall under this ordinance, to the grid, any buffer areas along, along the public roads. So that makes it a little bit
Yeah.
more complex
Okay. Yeah, it's
in
not.
terms of defining area.
Yeah.
What area you're talking about.
Okay. That's fine.
I mean, not that it can't be worked out. but
Right. Yeah, perhaps just a suggestion.
Yeah, no, it's food for thought.
The next item on that list was abutting dwelling units, and I was suggesting that, that is the major, I think the major impact on people is the abutting people and the abutting houses. And I do think that the ordinance should prohibit the construction of the modules, at least within, I'm suggesting a 250-foot buffer around any abutting houses. I think that's reasonable. From 250 feet away, or, they're gonna look pretty small in distance. That could eliminate, I think what you're most concerned about is people being unhappy about having their property next to one of these facilities. Very valid.
Mhm.
Decommissioning was the next thing. We did talk about this, I think, at least once. And I was suggesting that you should reference the existing state law and DEP approval of any. The DEP now has to approve decommissioning plans for any solar facility above a certain, I'm not sure what their criteria is actually, but it's above a certain size.
3 acres.
Is it? Okay.
Maybe they would have a definition of how to measure that 3 acres.
Okay, they use acreage too, but I don't know. I haven't studied that in detail. I'm just saying that, they pretty much, the new law does cover a lot of territory. Next item on the list was ownership changes over the life of the facility, which, is definitely a possibility. These assets are long-lived assets, and they are bought and sold amongst solar companies. So you need to, I think, address that issue. And I had some simple language that I took from a New York State model solar law. It said if the owner or operator of the facility changes, the town permit shall remain in effect, provided that the successor owner or operator assumes in writing all of the obligations of the town permit and the decommissioning plan. And that seems to provide some measure of protection for ownership changes.
Well, wouldn't they have to redo the bond or whatever we asked for? And that language, is that language in there, is that gonna be added to it? I mean, just because they sign on to what the permit is. I mean,
Yes.
they gotta, they gotta rebond, I would assume, right? I mean.
Yes, they do.
Mhm.
And that is included in the decommissioning plan. That's why I added that actually to the New York State thing at the end, and the decommissioning plan. Because the DEP requires that a decommissioning plan
Mhm.
has to be, in place. So they will need to redo their bond and redo the paperwork regarding, the decommissioning plan.
The new state law regarding decommissioning both defines transfer of ownership, and it also has a requirement along the lines of what you're describing, Craig, that maybe we could rely on.
Yeah,
2021 law.
Right, so maybe it should say, and referencing all requirements in that new law. Somehow, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know what you exactly say, but you need to reference that law. Any facility that wants a permit or wants to change ownership has to, comply with all the measures of that law, obviously. And any others is my own. And then the last item on the list was permit renewals, which we just had a discussion of another one. The language in, I'm not sure what the page is, but it's paragraph 4.1. It only allows the board to put, to allow a 1-year extension on a permit. And the situation with the solar projects is that there's a giant pileup of project proposals. And you probably read about it in the newspaper. The Portland Press Herald just had an article on it earlier this week or last week. That solar field isn't alone by any means in its predicament. It has not received an interconnection of such a power company. So I believe that specifically for the solar projects, that you should extend the permit time. And the letter from Smith Legal includes some language that specifically Solar Fields recommends lengthening the duration of permits for solar energy facilities, subject to the new ordinance language, including permits that were received or approved prior to December 31st, 2021. So I would suggest that you consider, in the case of solar facilities, instead of limiting yourself to 1 year plus a 1-year extension, that it should be perhaps 3 years with extensions beyond that if necessary. I mean, I can't even really tell you, even though we received our initial permit now 18 months ago, I still can't tell you when we're going to get an interconnection. In some way, I think you should address that situation.
So I have a question for the planning board on this particular topic of the extension. Our commercial development review ordinance was written with solar farms weren't part of the picture, right? So this whole dilemma of the backlog of utility companies being able to allow them to connect, that wasn't even part of the picture. So our 1-year extension was under the mindset and worldview of not those things. It was other commercial development things. So are we allowed to, in our ordinance, have an extension period of one frequency that's specific to like solar stuff and have a different extension for other stuff? So like 1 year for everything else, but 3 years for one particular activity. That would be my question. So.
I don't know the answer to that question. As I said earlier, I personally think that we should extend it for all projects because I could foresee Hammond Lumber building a large warehouse, or even the project we approved at Gagney running into problems where they would need more time than we're currently allowed to provide them. Whether it's a shortage of contractors or material, whether it's due to the pandemic or other economic conditions, another economic brouhaha with China or whatever. It seems like the ordinance was originally designed for pretty small business type development, which has been primarily what has fallen under it, but not necessarily so. you know, it makes me think of back when natural gas was being proposed to come through Belgrade, you know, whether that would have triggered the ordinance. And how, you know, it could have fallen under all kinds of regulatory issues. A large, say, a shopping center or something of that nature, that could easily take 18 months to get DEP approval. You know, so that's just not, having just 24 months maximum. 3 years would, you know, not be unreasonable, I would think, not for all projects, including solar, including gravel pits and, you know, all that stuff.
Oh, yep, that's a good point.
I could agree with that. It's one thing I would say is that rather than just providing for 3 years, this may be too general language to use, but something like for good cause shown, that the person didn't just dug around and not do it versus I had a problem.
Yeah, something beyond their control, you know, so not because it's been dubbing around watching, playing video games all the time, but you know, it's something in the market or, you know, is outside of their ability to control.
Now, would that be a 3-year total? That wouldn't be 3 years and a re-up for 3 years, so we have an open-ended permit for 6 years.
No, that's-
I wouldn't agree with that.
Yeah, no, that's not what I was suggesting. I was suggesting so that the maximum it could be extended to would be 3 years.
And it's across the board for everybody. in the
Yeah.
commercial. Yeah, I would agree to that.
Yeah.
But they have to come and renew every year. It's like evergreen for 3 years. So every, is it,
Yeah.
I think I
Yeah,
understand
or-
what you're saying, yeah.
Or, you know, the permit is initially good for, I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can skin this cat. You know, it's initially good for 2 years and then they up it for 1 more year.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the concept is there, and I think we're in agreement that the idea that you presented is a good one for not only solar
Yeah.
projects, but others too. And I think what I'm hearing is that would be of the mindset of doing it for everything, not just solar.
Right. 3 years. on it.
Right, for 1, 3 years. Okay, thanks. Steve, any other comments for us?
I think that's it. I did cover some other ground, but it's already been discussed, and I think that's all I have for it now.
Okay,
I'd like to have an opportunity to look at that and comment on the new regulations in draft form, if that's possible. And that's one of the, whatever else that occurs.
okay.
Thank you for allowing me to provide that commentary. I appreciate it.
Yes, we appreciate your input, that's for sure, so thank you. So that we've received these comments from you, you know, I'm sure we'll be thinking about those, and then we also have some other things to look through. So Anthony, are we okay to go ahead to
I think so.
the next part, to basically review right from the beginning? Is everybody okay to do that?
yeah, I have just one question for Steve. When we talk about the first item, acreage versus capacity of the solar array. So you're suggesting to use us to use acreage
Yes,
Mm.
in the language.
yeah.
And then in the language, are we gonna attach acreage to capacity too, or we just talk only about acreage?
I'm suggesting we talk about acreage. I think that's what matters to people. Everybody knows what half an acre is, whereas 100 kilowatts, actually the size of a 100 kilowatt facility is shrinking.
But that's now.
Yeah.
In 5 years, it can be probably double.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So you could, 100 acres, 100 kilowatts is the size of it is shrinking.
Yeah,
So on a half acre lot, without going to, I'm not talking about going up, but just with the more normal equipment, a half acre lot now, okay, could house 100 kilowatts.
uh-huh,
In 5 years, it might be 200 kilowatts.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So by staying, so in the, you would not suggest to even consider putting output in the ordinance?
I don't think it's necessary. I
Okay.
think that as the market, as the equipment improves, the efficiency,
Yeah.
all of that,
It's gonna
it
change.
opens up, more opportunities for using the half acre.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, great. So does, go ahead. Yeah.
So why would it open up more opportunities for the half acre?
In that. the-
Well, no, I guess I just said.
All set? Yeah. Great. So does everybody have the ordinance that has the, that was printed out here?
Which one is it, the town of Belgrade?
Correct.
Exactly. And so this is the one that was presented to the town's attorney, right?
No, we're still on the solar.
We're still,
Oh, sorry.
So this is the template, the KD cog template that Joel Greenwood previously presented to us.
Oh, okay.
And it says, as Craig said, town of Belgrade utility scale solar energy facility ordinance at the top.
Draft 1821.
Yeah, and it starts off with section 1 called purpose. So this was part of the package I gave you guys previously of all the ordinances. And
Yes.
and the template from KD cog is very personal.
Okay.
Does everyone have it, or do we need to make some extra copies, or?
I think we have it.
Oh, I haven't.
Yeah, Article 1, purposes and review criteria.
So mine reads section 1, purpose.
Maybe mine's just out of order. Hang on. Oh, just keep going without me.
It's got a cover memo from Joel Greenwood on it.
Right, Craig, show me this.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking.
Yeah.
On the other side. so it's right there.
Thanks.
How long ago is this one going out?
This is something I printed up maybe a month or two ago. And just encourage everyone to keep it. Just so we would have to try and find it. Find it, Peter.
Nope.
They already marked it up.
Hang on. I think you had a yellow sticky on it that said keep this.
Okay. Yeah, right.
So this-
I don't want to hold everybody up, but keep going.
Well, in the first section, as I mentioned, is purpose, so who doesn't have it? I mean, what I could do is just make copies of the first couple of pages. Because I figure that's probably all we'll get through this evening anyway.
George gave me an extra copy he's got, and I probably got it here.
Okay. Sarah, do you have? a
what
copy?
day was that? What day has that was printed?
The heading of the Joel Greenwood letter that was attached to October 19th,
October.
2020.
So I can pull it up. It will be in the electronic package, will it? Or you print, or you give it to us separately?
I think both.
Okay, so I'm good.
Okay.
I'll just pull it up here.
So it would have been maybe maybe like the first meeting in November.
First round, okay.
So So anyway, the title of this is Utility Scale Solar Energy Facility Ordinance. And the purpose starts off, the purpose of this ordinance is to establish a municipal review procedure and siting standards for utility scale solar facilities. So I guess the first question is that how we wish to refer to these sort of developments in our ordinance as utility scale solar facilities?
Well, the name's irrelevant. How we define it is what everything else hinges on in terms of our decision-making, in terms of how we regulate it and what we require. So this gets us back to what's the threshold for what this ordinance is going to apply to.
Yeah.
That we just discussed about. I would, before we delve into that or continue, I would just make sure everybody understands that, or suggest that this is going to go into Article 7 of the existing ordinance. It's not going to be a standalone ordinance, right? So,
Oh, yeah, you're correct. It won't
so
be a
this will be
standalone.
part of that article. It's labeled development standards for specific activities, and probably put it at the end. So it'll be section 5. And then from, where Joel had section numbers, those are going to be letters.
Right, to be,
Like purpose is going to be A, and authority is going to be B, et cetera.
Mhm.
The mining and the overnight accommodations, et cetera, sections.
Well, do you think, George, though, that, because I know that there's sections like telecommunication towers in the ordinance, and so do you think utility scale solar facilities is the proper way to describe this? I mean, my instinct tells me yes, because what we are trying to regulate are developments like Steve has proposed, where they're going to be
Yeah,
developing power to sell as electricity through a utility.
I'm comfortable with that. I think it would be indicative to the public of what we're trying to accomplish and what we're not trying to accomplish, but I don't know. I
Yeah,
can't
in other
speak for
words,
others.
this is not your backyard solar panel
Right,
or your
and
rooftop solar panel.
right, yeah. It's just a question of how we define that.
right.
Uh,
In my opinion, even though it's a foreign term to me, I think it's very applicable in this situation, because quite frankly, it could be other types of things that may apply to this that we're not even thinking of quite yet. So it would be good to, I think, use this.
Yeah.
And then define it and then convey that information to the townsfolk.
I agree, because it's pretty straightforward, and over the last few weeks, I've been trying to go through solar ordinances, or even finding them. I've been struggling with finding them. And the ones I have found, for basic layperson like me, that not into this type of stuff. Simpler, more basic, straightforward wording is the easiest to navigate, and this basically spits her in on utility scale, and we'll just define that the way we want to define that.
I mean, it really varies from town to town a great deal, and a lot of it seems to me have to do with whether a town has zoning or not. We don't, and so, but like Reed Fields is quite complex.
Yes.
Other towns are also fairly complex, with 4 or 5 different categories of solar facilities, and including regulating ones on a top of a residence, in some cases, which I don't think is what our objective is, but, or really what this ordinance is about, but I agree, Craig, it has to be something we can implement.
I'm good with it.
Rich and Sarah, you good with using that term?
Mhm.
All right, well, the purpose is to establish a municipal review procedure, which is what you guys do, and citing standards for utility scale solar facilities. Seems pretty straightforward. These standards are intended to, and then there's 5 different points here. A, establish clear guidelines and standards to regulate utility scale solar energy facilities. Seems reasonable.
It does.
Permit the town to fairly and responsibly protect public health, safety, and welfare. Kind of what the government does at its core.
Yep.
Support the development of utility scale solar energy facilities in a manner that minimizes any potential adverse effects on the scenic, cultural, and natural resource character of the town. I think that's a critical one for a place like Belgrade.
Mhm.
Provide for the removal of panels and associated utility structures that are no longer being used for energy generation and transmission purpose. That's your decommissioning.
Mhm.
Now, I guess the question there is, we've talked about in discussing decommissioning, no longer being used for power generation and transmission purpose. Would we want to consider indicating for some sort of commercial purpose in there? So in other words, as we've talked about, something is no longer viable if it's not generating electricity for sale versus simply generating electricity and transmitting.
Mhm. So I think for me, I think the answer is yes, we want to include something about the viability of it, right? Because we kind of get wander around the axle, whether it's going to be generating or selling and stuff. I myself was thinking, both ways about this, and then, maybe the intent about it is, no matter how much you're generating or not generating, it's what's going out. How do you phrase it with the,
For commercial
For
purpose. I mean,
commercial
this
purposes.
is the commercial development review
Yeah.
ordinance, and so we're really want to focus on activities as they relate to business.
right?
So later on in the ordinance, we're gonna explain what that, we would explain what that commercial limit would be. or-
Yeah, well, I mean, that's something that we discussed as part of the decommissioning discussion. Is what is the threshold? And I think,
What's the threshold?
yeah, and I think we heard from Reedfield, they considered it to be 10%.
10%.
Yes.
But in this section of the ordinance, I just didn't know if we wanted to put for energy generation, transmission, and sales purposes or commercial purposes. I guess you probably don't even need to say commercial, since it is in the commercial development review ordinance, but
So maybe something just in sales
yeah.
or something. That makes sense to people.
Rather than commercial, I would use non-residential, be consistent with the rest of the ordinance.
Oh,
So if it said be used for non-residential energy generation and transmission purpose, I like that.
yeah.
Can we go back to C after this is resolved for a second?
I think we're there, Rich.
Yep.
I'm thinking that would C be better off if we put regulate the development of utilities scale, solar energy, blah, blah. I'm not sure the planning board role is to support, not that I'm opposed to it, but I'm more thinking we're more a regulatory board, if you will, versus a supporting board. We're not out to support Hammond lumber, we're not out to support whatever we're regulating the development. And I just find that a weird word in the ordinance.
I see.
I think that is an important nuance.
Yeah, I
Mm.
agree too.
So strike the word support and rather, and use what word would you
Regulate,
regulate? That sound acceptable?
Yeah.
Okay,
Here's one where I bet Rich will support the use of the word support. Support the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, including orderly development, efficient use of infrastructure, and protection of natural and scenic resources.
I support that.
George, as our local expert on the comp plan, do you think there's anything else that needs to be
No,
included in that language?
that'll be fine.
Section B authority, that just sort of legal mumbo jumbo.
Yeah, boilerplate.
I, let's see here. I pull off this one here. I thought this was on, this had this little, but I'm getting lost a little bit. It has this thing over in there. Yeah.
You need me to see if I can find that email from Joel and resend it.
That actually will work for me if you can resend it. Because I just look at the planning board notes and I can see the symbol, the logo of the Kennebec Valley Council of Governments. And here that some of you guys have in your notes.
The logo, yeah.
Yeah,
You say, can you see it?
I can see the logo, yeah, but I cannot follow what Anthony is reading.
Here, which, take this, that's a extra paper copy. Rich
How
didn't
about
need
here,
it.
but I have a logo, but I don't have,
that's okay, let's go with this.
sure, perfect.
Let's carry on.
Mhm.
Okay, so applicability. I guess I have a question about the first sentence on paragraph A there. Unless specifically exempted from the permit requirements of this ordinance. I mean, under what circumstances would a utility scale solar facility be specifically exempted from an ordinance? It's just hard for me to imagine what that circumstance
Yeah.
would be.
That's awkward language. I was going to suggest that we relocate both the applicability, however we decide to find that, into the existing applicability section in the front of the ordinance, because that's where everything else is.
Yep.
And likewise for any exemptions. In that same section is a list of exemptions. And I mean that I actually you'll have to recognize that I made some assumptions about what we're regulating in this that are now probably inaccurate, but I have some suggested language. I'm sure I provide a copy to Steve. Oh, Skip, can I have a copy?
You're welcome. Thank you.
So if you go to Article 3 on page 3, which is the applicability section for the entire ordinance, we would just need to add in utility scale solar energy facilities into probably D would be the best place where the other similar uses are that don't involve structures necessarily, or buildings, I should say. As you can see in number 1 there. And then under in section 2, where we have all the exemptions, I have a list of exemptions there that I got from various other town ordinances, with the goal of ensuring that we're not running residential and rooftop and the kinds of integrated solar that if you've ever been to Freeport, you see on Main Street there. There's a couple stores where they have canopies that are actually solar panels. And those things that I don't think are necessarily what we want to spend our time and concerns on. The first exemption there that's up for grabs at this point because we need to decide what we're regulating. That was based on KV Cog's definition of a utility scale of 0. megawatts or greater than 0. So that would be wrong. But anyway, that was kind of how I was thinking about it, that we'd be consistent with how we deal with all the other types of development that fall under this ordinance, because and it would seem to me that a potential developer, where they're going to see if the ordinance applies to them, where they're going to go first is the applicability section at the front of the ordinance, not something at the very end.
So 0.1 megawatt is that?
Yeah, we got to discuss that, obviously.
So
I was making an
is it the
assumption that we're
same
going
thing?
with what KV Cog had suggested, so
Yeah.
we got to figure out what we're doing there.
Yeah.
But
So is it the same amount, basically? We're just going to determine our language?
well, yeah, I don't know how to deal with that right off the top of my head, Greg, in terms of area, like Steve suggested, and how a lot of other towns deal with it, including, but I'm mostly presenting this as just where in the ordinance it could go, and some of the exemptions that would keep the scope of what we're regulating onto the focus truly on something that's a utility scale, something that's producing electricity to sell into the grid, and ensure that we're not capturing accidentally things that we really don't want to regulate. Like, for example, a business that has solar, but they're only using that electricity themselves, they're not selling it to the grid. I don't think we care about that. Maybe we do. I don't know. I mean, it's just for discussion.
No, that's fine. We're just gonna figure out the language of 0.1 megawatt.
Right.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. Steve, you had a question?
Yeah, I have a couple of comments. Following Greg's question, I think you should just use 100 kilowatts rather than a new number of 0.1 megawatts,
It's
I mean,
confusing. It's confusing a lot of
It is.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
use it consistently.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
And it may not even be in, as you suggested, maybe we'll end up with some kind of acreage
Yeah.
measurement.
Right.
I made that
And that
comment,
falls
but
in,
it's not a major. To Solar Fields as a company, it doesn't matter whatsoever.
Mhm.
And I don't think it's a major, it's not a major change one way or the other, whether you use 100 kilowatts or half.
yeah, no, it's the equivalent.
More importantly, though, number 5 here, now this is a list of solar energy facilities exempt from this ordinance, all right?
Right.
And number 5, I have a serious concern about that one because, there are a lot of proposals for the net metering type of project. Solar Fields initially thought that that's what we might develop, and we've kind of change that to be just selling onto the grid as a competitive, competitive marketplace, but it appears that you're exempting projects where the sale of electricity to the grid is via net metering. And you could be exempting a considerable number of projects there, which I don't think you want to do. Specifically, projects up to 5 megawatts, which is, twice the size of what we're proposing, are now, a lot of them are net metering projects.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure exactly why you want to exclude those.
Well, why don't I describe the objective and then, maybe we can hash it out. What I was concerned about is a small business or even potentially a home, but particularly a small business that has a facility in their yard on the rooftop, and the sale of that to the grid through the net metering system somehow is construed to be a commercial activity because you're selling a product, and therefore triggers the ordinance. And that's why I put in the language conditioning this of a legally permitted residential or non-residential land use. Of course, I don't know what you know, and that, even a larger facility would be using net metering and getting some kind of rebate or whatever.
Yeah. The net metering can be, used by developers to sell power to commercial and industrial facilities as well as residential customers.
Can you give me an example?
Well, there's one facility that's, I think, lined up contracts with hospital systems in the state.
Okay.
And the hospital systems have contracts with the developer to receive the credits, the net metering credits that would reduce their power bill. And there are many projects now that you
You
can.
wanna
In
open up?
fact, the town of Belgrade has one of those agreements in place, so we're gonna benefit from net metering with Edison.
Edison,
Yeah.
okay.
So-
Well, I have one at my house even, that's the way the.
Yeah, well, and that's what I was thinking is perhaps one way to allow that is just to simply limit it to residential, to that activity at residences.
Or above a certain size,
Or
what about the 100
cap-
kilowatts?
Yeah, or cap the number of kilowatts that are being
Yeah.
fed to the
Could
grid.
do that. So, you say in number 1, a solar facility of 100 kilowatts or less.
Well, I got a suggestion.
Yeah.
Then, let's say, for instance, Hammond Lumber wanted to go all solar, and then they go over the cap. Why don't we say, we phrase it so that whatever energy they're producing is for their own use?
Uh-huh.
Well, although I think in the case of residences, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, Steve, because I know I have a friend who's like this, they have solar panels on their barn. It generates more electricity than they need. And so they sell the surplus or excess
Oh, I
electricity.
forgot about that. Yes.
To the electric company for credits.
I like what he said about just moving the 100 kilowatt down to there, because it's already exempt.
And that makes it, I think that makes a lot of sense, Craig. I mean, we've already established what is a utility scale, so anything less than 100 kilowatts.
So it might make sense to just eliminate that and stick with some effect of the others. For example, the example with Hammond Lumber, which I've used myself in the past, they would still, first off, be able to produce that up to 100 kilowatts. If they did it on rooftops, they would be exempt, which if they if, now, if they took the field across the other side of the railroad and turned that into a solar array, then that's a different matter.
Mhm.
That might require regulation. If they use ground mounted.
Well, not if it doesn't exceed 100
Yeah, right,
kilowatts,
and not if it, yeah, right.
I mean, I
I
think
don't know, that's like 3-acre field. or
See, what I
whatever.
cannot gauge is if an outfit, there's a local employer like Hammond Lumber, are they gonna need more than 100 kilowatts? If they would go that
I
way?
don't know,
I don't know.
yeah, but, well, let's use a
Yes.
different example, let's use
They want it to be
Belgrade
right,
Central
right,
School. Let's use Belgrade Central School,
Right,
a lot of rooftop, they might stick some out in the ball field or something.
yeah.
But again, you know, if they stay under the 100 kilowatt, they would be exempt. I mean, we can't, speaking for myself, I would like to encourage institutions like that to be looking at those kinds of options. If they break the threshold, then they're regulated, so be it, but
Yeah, I think number 5 could be eliminated. It's kind of getting into an area that this net metering is being used widely, and
yeah.
you don't want to exclude net metering projects from this set of regulations.
That came from the town of Chelsea's ordinance.
Okay.
So do people want to eliminate that then?
Yes.
I think so. That would be, based on this discussion.
Yeah, I mean, that is a classic example of, I don't, you know, this is not my area of expertise.
Most people don't know what net metering really entails and means.
I had a simplified,
We've heard the words,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
well, I just didn't understand that it can be ramped up in
Yeah.
scale.
That's the big change in the law that took place in 2019 with the Maine Solar Energy Act, as it's informally called, is that they greatly expanded the applicability of net metering to facilities up to 5,000 kilowatts or 5 megawatts. So it's now available to very large, I would call them large, but people in the solar industry think it's them as small.
So while we're on the subject of exemptions, on the KV cog template, paragraph B exempts solar facilities. One of the exemptions is based upon the square footage. Anything 800 square feet or less. Is that a standard? that we'd like to exempt?
Can you repeat that again?
So it reads, sir, and I did email that to all you guys just now a little while ago, but solar energy, so the exemption is for solar energy facilities occupying 800 square feet or less are exempt from the requirements of this ordinance, but must meet state electrical codes and permitting requirements and applicable requirements of any other ordinance of the town of Belgrade.
I think we'd get rid of that and just stay with 100 kilowatt.
You would? Well, if it's 800 square feet or less, it's probably going to be generating less than 100 kilowatts. So,
Right.
yeah.
It's just redundant.
Yeah,
Today, but in 10 years.
Right.
so
Well, in 10 years, we would have to amend the ordinance, I suppose.
True.
You know, when this whole thing started,
That's like 80 by 10 or something. like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
in my mind, that I was trying to curve around that, so we don't have to keep up with the ordinance as the
Well-
technology change.
And,
Right,
you know,
that's what I was.
Yeah, I was trying to avoid that.
but the problem is, who knows where the technology will take us?
Right, right, exactly.
the curious thing, when I first,
Adopted to be amended.
Yeah.
the curious thing that when I read that was it conflicts with the way KV cog, defined utility scale.
Yeah.
So you had this in-between character that's not exempt, but not, the ordinance doesn't apply to it. So it didn't make a lot of sense to me.
So I think we would benefit by just simply striking it like was
Yeah,
mentioned. Is
I
that-
agree.
Take it out.
So I'm sorry, Peter, you said just striking the applicability section altogether?
No,
No,
Uh,
the 800 square feet.
Well,
Oh, yeah, okay.
yeah,
we're
just-
eliminating where it is, I think, correct?
Yeah.
I agree
Correct.
with George's assessment that it ought to go up in the front.
agreed.
Yeah.
And then to not include, if I may say it this way, to not include this paragraph B, which talks about the 800 square foot thing.
Well, and it looks to me like even paragraph A under applicability, we wouldn't need that because that would be woven into what George just suggested with Article 3.
Yep.
True,
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
true.
The only remaining piece that's not captured by what I suggested, or what's in this little discussion paper, is the last line of small a, the physical expansion, reconfiguration, or increase in, well, they use rated nameplate capacity. And that's some, there's a, I think what that gets at is, if somebody is gonna expand a facility that we permitted, they need to come back and get approval for that expansion.
Yeah, no
And-
matter what ordinance or what project you're talking.
Right, so one thing we could do with, I know Steve had suggested that rated nameplate capacity might not be a good measure, but whatever the measure is, that could go into the section of the existing section of the ordinance that deals with amendments.
That would be
Or we
section,
could leave it here. It kind of 6 of one, half a dozen the other, because it's pretty specific to this kind of facility.
Well, do you think, George, I mean, your exemptions note repair or replacement of facility components that do not enlarge the impervious surface area of a solar energy generating facility. If you were going to be engaged in a physical expansion, possibly reconfiguration, or an increase in the rated nameplate capacity, would those things increase the footprint or the impervious footprint of the project? And those, and then by extension, are not exempt?
Not necessarily, as Steve mentioned, as technology advances, these panels are going to become more efficient, and you could produce more, the same or more with smaller footprint, so.
Smaller footprint or even the same?
So I'm really more interested in, if somebody's gonna expand, however we measure it, the area, the development area, that it comes back to the planning board for review so that we can look at stormwater runoff and phosphorus runoff and all those issues.
So you think that sentence that against any physical expansion needs to be worked into our ordinance, but maybe at this point it's not clear exactly where?
Yeah, I mean, I think the two options are, to rename it or something and leave it basically where it is, or move it into where's that?
section 6 deals with amendments. in
Yeah, that's
commercial.
it, Peter. What page is that on?
Now, I'm gonna ask something very odd. After, because this can happen actually. Let's say we have all this price going all over the United States. And let's say new technology come about and an existing farm have problems with it, some of the section of the solar panels, and they got to buy older panels that they can put in that actually are bigger. You understand what I said? I don't think that this just something is thinking out loud here, because this happens in the manufacturing sites. It's very unlikely that might happen with solar, but let's say somebody buy old technology to put in a solar farm that is already existing. And the old technology I don't know, by intuition, you will think that the panels will be bigger. So
But
we,
you would need more of them to generate.
yeah,
Yeah,
so that means that actually they probably most likely will need more area.
yeah.
So they're downsizing. So I was trying to think that maybe using the word, using the criteria or the requirement of the rated name plate capacity. Just saying that it's increasing. Might be, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, you're trying to create a scenario where it wouldn't be increasing the capacity.
It wouldn't
but
be
it might
increasing the
be
capacity.
increasing the land needed.
But they will need more land.
And so that's an argument
That's
to,
conceivable, I guess.
to stick with measures of
Acreage.
the area of development. However, we define that rather than based on
On the rate of,
capacity or.
Yeah.
So page 16, I think, is where you're at, Peter.
I think that is right.
Revisions to an approved plan. And it reads, the planning board shall review and may approve a proposed change to any permit which is has issued in accordance with the article which involves any of the following conditions. And then we would have to add something like the language that KB Cog has provided that starts with any physical expansion. Just add to that bulleted list.
So that's section 9.1 that you guys are talking about?
Correct.
Yes.
So I think because we got a lot of work ahead of us on the subdivision ordinance, I don't think we can linger on this too long. One question on the definition. So the definitions that KB Cog gave us, should those just go in the existing section of definitions in the existing ordinance?
In my opinion, they either have to match if they're not in there, and be rolled in. Or if they already exist. Because I don't think we have anything for financial capacity. We do not. So that would have to be rolled into the definition section. Rated nameplate, we don't have. Residential dwelling structure, I think we do have. Stand by.
Certainly do in shoreline zoning.
Yes, we do.
The definition of residential dwelling unit.
But you know what? It may not be in the commercial development review ordinance, so
Correct. When I go to page 47,
I don't see anything.
I do not see it. In 48, it goes to restaurant. So 46, 7 goes peak hour volume into restaurant. So as long as my suggestion would be whatever it is we use, that it matches what we have in the other ordinance,
Oh, yeah.
right? So if we do roll that in, then we should make sure that it is consistent. Transfer of ownership, do we have?
I would suggest that, well, actually, that's the same as what's in state law.
Oh, that reads that way?
What Katie Cog has in little d is the same definition for transfer of ownership.
Great.
as in state law.
And then we certainly don't have existing a definition for utility solar.
No,
scale.
that's where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
I think that's what we need to focus on
Yeah.
for the next meeting.
Yep.
And there are two other definitions that I would suggest adding to this list from state law. One is definition of decommissioning. And the second is a definition of farmland, which is defined in statute. Since later on we'll be dealing with that.
Yes.
And Anthony,
And did you say take the definition from the state statute? of
yeah,
decommissioning as
it's,
well?
it's in Title 35A, subsection 3491. I memorized that. I got the stuff right on. I got nothing better to do in my retirement.
Use your
Long
time.
winter.
One quick question. Where and how are you pulling up all these ordinances, so it makes it easier on me to pull them up?
The town ordinances,
Yeah,
the way I did it was, you mean that table I produced?
well, that, or, looking at the ordinances, how do you pull them up on your computer?
Oh, the way I did it was, I just went to the various town websites. And then, for some towns that I read about or heard about that they had ordinances, but didn't, like China presumably has an ordinance. I Googled it. In China's case, they don't have an ordinance, but as it turns out, but in the case of, let's say, Manchester, I Googled Manchester solar ordinance and found it.
You found it? Because I was just finding bits and pieces. I couldn't find the whole ordinance.
Yeah, I did find the whole thing.
I was looking at Manchester as well.
Yeah, but it's not on their website.
Well, that's what I was looking at.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go figure,
no,
right?
Mom, the same way. It's not on their website.
So how do you?
I just happened to, I just Googled Monmouth solar ordinance and
Oh, so-
came across it that way. But,
So you use the term,
yeah,
right, rather than what
Go on the
others might
website.
do, might be thinking logically, let's go to that town's website and find if they have it.
yeah.
That's right.
I mean, that's what I did at first, and I read in a newsletter from the Kennebec Land Trust that those two towns had an ordinance. And and that's what gave me the idea,
Mhm.
maybe they just didn't post it.
Yeah.
Yet.
Yeah, who'd have thunk it, right? And
So I mean, I even Googled Central Maine municipalities, solar ordinances and stuff like that. I'm getting nowhere.
Yeah, no,
You gotta go, you
I
gotta
went
put the town.
town by town, and
Yeah.
I selected towns on that table just because there are other lake communities. Or there were towns that, like I did some of the, wealthier suburbs of Portland, thinking if any town would have something, they would.
Mhm.
That wouldn't, turned out to be an erroneous assumption.
Not everyone's website is as good as ours.
That's right, that's
I
right.
won't say that,
There
actually.
you go.
Yeah.
We actually have all our ordinances now posted on our website.
You're good.
I was there looking for them today, and I was really impressed with how nice it looked for finding all those ordinances.
Yeah.
It was really good.
That takes some reporting skills.
No, I just asked Mary to do it.
But to think about doing that, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, because I face the same frustrations, Greg and George, and when you go to a town's website, and expecting you're looking for their ordinance, and they've got one, but you can't find it on their website, it's frustrating, so I just wanted to make sure that wasn't the case for people visiting our website.
Yeah. Well,
So are we gonna go on to the subdivision one?
Yes, Les.
May I just ask that we take a 5-minute bio break? We've been at it for a bit now. Is that okay?
Yeah. That's
Drinking
right.
all that iced tea right there.
Yeah, I know. Thanks.
I'm gonna
Be back in
pause the
5.
recording.
Okay,
So, the attorney reviewed the subdivision ordinance as part of your package. He said there were no substantive changes, at least as far as he believed. in this. So I was just looking through this. I thought maybe the best way to go through this is just to look at the notes that he had on the side. And so the first such note is on page 7.
Can we just go to page 4 first?
Yes,
Those, his notes,
yes.
the thing is that we don't have outstanding river segments in Belgrade. So that, we can skip over, but that, I'm reading that.
Well, if that's the case,
Pardon me?
if that's the case, maybe we should simply just delete all that.
Yeah, well, I think that we originally did because of that very reason.
Okay. Well, Bill's just not as,
It's not-
So we're taking that out.
So K goes away, right?
Okay, goes
K
away.
itself doesn't go
No.
away.
K1,
The highlights do, right?
yes, exactly.
Okay, yeah. Gotcha. Thanks, Rich.
Okay, so page 7.
7.
that looks fine to me.
It looks fine to me too.
Anthony, are you PS 2R1?
No, that's Phil Socher. He's the attorney.
Oh. I understand. Okay, gotcha. Next,
It's like a note, my printing copy.
Yeah, on page 14,
Yeah, let me look at that.
yeah, I saw that too.
So,
just barely build.
so that first sentence, the attorney writes, the town may want to consider adding waiver language similar to the major subdivision plan submissions.
Oh,
So the way we approached this was for the minor subdivision, and remembering that you know, this makes our ordinance somewhat unique compared to other towns, was to reduce the amount of, the number of things we're going to require in the first, rather than
Yeah.
have it like the major subdivision, where you had a core group, a core list of information that everybody had to provide, then a list of information that could be required, but a waiver could be requested. So we had like 2 tiers, and
Well, and of
so I'm
course-
not sure it's really
Yeah,
necessary
and of course,
myself.
he doesn't have that context, and I think the key word in what he wrote is that the town may.
And I did bring that up, actually, the waiver on the minor subdivision due to dirty deeds, dirty property deeds that could, you know, can't exactly remember the details of what would kick that off, but it was something to do with deeds were convoluted.
Or flawed in some sort of way.
Where a waiver would help.
Yeah.
So that would be pretty much the only reasoning that I would have.
So like a limited waiver to one or more of these requirements, is that what you're suggesting, Chris?
I don't exactly know how you would do it, but yeah. Yeah, I guess. Limited to one or more, to one or. What was the wording you just said?
Well, I was just trying to figure out how to accomplish what you were suggesting. I just, is there a specific
So Craig, is what you're talking about, would that be paragraph 4 on page 15?
Yeah, but no. I mean, that deals directly with the deed. I don't have the specifics in front of me. Um, Seems like. Just seems like we should be able to give a waiver in a minor subdivision as well as a major. I mean, if we don't like as a group what we're gonna waiver, then it won't go through anyways.
So just
What would the wording be?
well, and I just did a search on waiver, and so under mandatory subdivisions for a major subdivision preliminary plan, it says the following items shall be submitted as part of the major subdivision preliminary plan application, unless the applicant submits a written waiver request and is granted a waiver from the submission required by the planning board pursuant to Article 12. So I would assume we would simply just sort of copy and paste that, move it up into. Yeah, move it up into the top of page 14. Just change it to. Actually say minor subdivision.
I mean, I'd be okay with that. I think it's unlikely that we would grant a waiver, seeing how the list is so short and the information we're requesting is so basic. But if some kind of convoluted situation came up like you're trying to describe, then at least that option would be there.
Hmm,
Um,
right. Even though odds are against it, I mean, hey,
yeah,
things
I
could
mean,
happen.
You know,
so-
we're not gonna grant a waiver to a copy of the deed, you know, I mean.
Right, right.
Or, you know, or the basic site plan, you know, we're not
Right,
gonna
right.
do that, but,
Right. But if there's something
but, you
odd,
know, if there's something that we're not thinking of comes
Yeah.
up, at least that option would be there.
I would certainly be okay with that. I can't imagine any harm in having that sentence just like that in this section too. I don't, are people okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, you
So
know,
let me plug that in.
Okay.
How do you avoid a waiver to be misused or overused?
well, I mean,
A waiver
it-
clause.
Hmm,
if a future planning board wanted to misuse it, the town's got bigger problems.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, I mean, not to mention, probably if there are any abutters involved, you know, they'll challenge it and prevail.
True.
I guess the one question I have about that is about this language. It says, is granted a waiver from the submission required by the planning board pursuant to Article 12. So Article 12, I just want to make sure relates to waivers.
Article 12.
Because Article 12 includes about inspections. and
Inspections and enforcement, waivers are later on.
Maybe that's something.
Um,
Yeah, it should be Article 17.
Yeah,
Okay.
Just off by 5.
Yeah.
Just a V.
that was a fortuitous catch.
Okay.
Okay, let me go and correct that both sections. It looks like the next note is on page 20.
Yes. So his comment has to do with if we allow if we include some language to allow the board to have a condition,
Conditional approval.
yeah, that way the process could still move forward.
Yeah.
Not opposed to that. There is an advantage both to the applicant and to us, though, that get their state approvals first. Because in the case of phosphorus control and stormwater management, if they have those approvals through DEP already, then we just check off the box and they don't have to do any more. Versus if they come, I suppose the way under this suggestion, what would happen is we would approve it. I don't know how we would make a finding about those things when we go through the findings of fact, but
We know.
I guess we'd put a condition on it saying, let's submit those or documentation that you got DEP approved your plans and submit it to the planning board for our approval, and that way we could make a positive finding.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I
I'm,
know, I kind of like what's happening right now with the solar farm on Route 11, that they're having to get their DEP approval before they come to us, and that way we don't spend a lot of time spinning our wheels approving something, and then it doesn't win approval at the state, and we just wasted a lot of time. And that-
yeah, actually, that's a good point.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen too,
Mhm.
where they get bounced back and forth.
and so-
Because general, a lot of times the state's more rigorous than the
Right.
town would be.
Right, and so, yeah, I would just hate to invest a lot of time and effort approving an application and then it goes nowhere because the state rejects it.
And perhaps it could also lead to less frustration for the applicant, right? Rather than bouncing around saying, geez, we're just waiting for this and waiting for that,
Well, and less cost too.
and less cost. So maybe I'm projecting my own bias, but I think I like for the applicant to get that stuff in order first. Myself.
Does that need to be addressed in this, for instance, this portion that Bill highlighted? Does that need to be rewritten in some?
I mean,
sort of
this
way?
is pretty loose. It leaves us with the discretion to require, simply to require a written opinion about whether they indeed need
Well,
state approval. And so, it doesn't really fence us in terms of either doing it by condition or requiring it in advance.
Well, so when you look back at page 19, that paragraph actually begins, prior to submittal of the minor subdivision final plan application, the following approvals shall be obtained in writing where applicable. So if you just remove that paragraph that Phil highlighted, then it does require someone to get their state approvals before the planning board considers their application.
Right.
Well,
actually, I don't really like that.
You don't?
No, because I think what the blue says is that if there are out there other requirements that we're not aware of, we put the burden on the applicant to get them.
But what's written there and what's highlighted is the applicant may be required to obtain a written opinion from the appropriate agency as to the applicability of their regulations. That doesn't necessarily mean that the regulating agency ends up granting them a state permit.
But before they come here, they have to have a statement.
It's a
That's
statement, but it's not a permit.
I see.
no, but it does allow us to require them. We're not always gonna know if they need a state permit,
Right,
and that's not been uncommon in past, at least commercial developments.
mhm,
We do so few subdivisions, I can't speak to subdivisions, but where I certainly didn't know whether or not they needed say a variance from the DHHS for their wastewater disposal system. Maybe with you on board, maybe you'll know,
Okay.
or whether they need a traffic movement permit. Those things are sort of over my head, and so this would give us a means to
To fall
get
back.
documentation of whether or not they need to get that permit.
mhm.
Well,
Army Corps permits.
And again, maybe the key word here is Bill writes the town may, and so maybe you don't want to approve it until you have that written opinion in hand.
The way I read it, you put the burden of this, because regulations can change. And we cannot necessarily can keep with all of them. So it give us I don't know, a safety zone where we put the burden of this kind of thing on the applicant. And it relates, even when we are almost about to approve, if something pops up, we have the fallback, so listen, this change, we cannot do this.
In the context of little c, I don't see where that paragraph that's been highlighted undermines the requirement that if they are required to get a permit, that they must do so in advance.
Yeah, and the more I read it, think about it, George, I think you're right. It's just, if you guys have a question about whether or not there's some state
Yeah.
regulation involved, you can require them to
Right.
get a written opinion of that.
Right, right.
But in general.
And at that point, I guess y'all's process would stop until they got that written opinion.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Yep, exactly right.
Okay, well, I'm just gonna remove his comment.
Yeah. 21,
Yeah.
The idea of whether we post it at Christie's or.
I was just reeling about this to our legislative, to the MMA's legislative director. I think that's an outdated way of letting the public know that something's going on. Have you ever seen anyone reading a posting at the post office?
nope.
I do.
Luddite.
I like to look at the pictures of the criminals myself.
Same. It's a different type of posting.
In case it's somebody I know or me.
Yeah,
I just would consider that, and don't take me wrong. You consider doing that for people, usually the elders will like to, they don't get all this information through internet.
Yeah, of course, I also rail against the sentence above that, because I think too few people read the newspaper to have publishing of public notice in the paper of record to be worth.
But some
more
people
money to
do
spend
that.
These days anyway, so.
yeah, some people do. I know my
We
parents
have the
put the paper every
rulemaking
day.
Notices every Wednesday.
Yeah.
Well, and, I mean, it's just, in this day and age where we've all got municipal websites, that's a good place to post this stuff, not at Christie's and not in the agent or the Cajun.
Good
But-
chance to get a cup of coffee. Paid for it.
Yeah.
Uh,
So do we just,
George is at Dave's with his cup of coffee and his donut, just reading the postings.
Well, sometimes when you get the public notice, I mean,
Now, will you post it right here in
I
the,
know.
in the town
once
office?
in a
Yes.
while I read them. When
So
you see
that-
public notice written on the top of it.
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody's on Facebook, not everybody's
Right.
scared on the town
Yeah.
webpage.
I mean, I'm somewhat sympathetic to people who either don't have computers, aren't,
The people that,
have no ability or
Mhm.
to.
Almost everyone has a computer now, George. I know you don't. But almost everyone has a
Look,
computer.
me and the rest of the Luddites in town.
Hey, I can tell you, my brother has neither a credit card, a cell phone, or a computer.
Well, I was just thinking of
It's not the Unabomber.
like our neighbor, who, she doesn't have a computer. She's an 85-year-old woman. Um,
She
She
reading
likes
the
it.
note-
She's a longtime Belgrade resident.
Is she reading the notices at Christie's?
What's that?
Is she reading the notices at Christie's? She
Well,
might be reading the newspaper though.
yeah, she does read the newspaper religiously and every bit of it.
So it sounds like we want to keep that provision.
Well,
the thing that's put the burdens on you. I just trying to make a middle ground into it.
That's gonna be under Richard's contract.
Take care of that.
And other duties as
So
assigned.
then what three locations we will assign as the major three locations?
Say again?
What three locations,
Oh,
prominent places will be
So
the three
so it would
prominent
probably
places?
be here in both of the post offices.
Yeah. And both of them, okay, good.
Yeah,
Yeah, that would make sense.
I mean, I think that's traditionally what's been done.
No, the website is not considered a
prominent.
place within the municipality.
So the places are here, what, Christie?
And the
No,
post
I would say
office.
Here in both
I
post
can see the
offices.
people in Bell, North
Although-
Belgrade.
Although normally we post it at the rec center as well, at the library, at Christie's and at Dave's, when Dave's.
I mean, the only place posted up in North Belgrade would be.
Well, you be,
And,
I guess my,
Sporadically.
yes,
and Tripod,
Oh,
and that's technically out of town.
Yeah, I was about to say, that's not in Belgrade.
right, but that's where it serves.
That's
North Belgrade.
Oh,
Yeah, it does. That's where I go.
Okay,
so you were covered with, I guess you were in, following ordinance, we're just doing the post offices in here.
it well says at least 3 places.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Page 32.
Yes.
What do y'all think about this suggestion?
So he kind of flips it, right? So rather than talking about for which a waiver may be granted, he
Right.
says preliminary plan that may be required.
Yeah.
I could certainly live with his suggestion. I am not wedded to keeping it worded the way it is. I don't know how others feel.
Maybe required.
I'm not opposed to it either.
But actually, I like his suggestion.
yeah, I'm fine with this suggestion.
So let's go with it. Craig, you okay with that?
Yeah, I don't think it makes that much difference, but
No,
it's just
It's
more
just,
straightforward without wording it around. It's more straightforward with which a waiver may be granted. But either way, I'm fine with it.
Page 36.
Basically the same thing we just talked about. Earlier.
yeah,
Okay, so we'll just nix that comment. 39.
All right. So what he's getting at here is how this could seriously delay a decision. Right, because he's saying in this highlighted section, if proposed streets or open spaces or the land is to be offered to the municipality, written evidence that the municipal officers, basically the CEO and
No,
anybody
the
else.
municipal officers are the select board.
Select board, okay, select board, are satisfied with the legal sufficiency that it has conveyed. Because this would have to be done,
That's right. So the town voters have to accept the gifts of land, like when the village green was offered to the town, the voters had to approve that.
and in the context of submitting a plan for a subdivision, this would be under the mandatory submissions, so you'd have to get the voters to approve it before you submit it.
Way I read this was they need to approach the select board and present their proposal to ensure that at least the select board's on board, even though ultimately the voters would have to approve it.
Yeah, I agree. It says to receive an intent from the select board to place acceptance on a future town meeting warrant. So the condition it on voter approval is just
Right.
on the select board's agreement to put it on a town meeting warrant.
So the key word there is, in the current wording, is that the select board is basically satisfied.
With legal sufficiency too of the written offer.
So what do we do then with the town's attorney's comment?
Sorry, Peter.
What do we do with his comment? Do we say what we have is good, or are we saying we
That
want
would be
to?
my inclination.
Just to leave it as is.
Leave it as is.
That would be mine too.
Because of figure. You know. Basically what they want to do is. Most of the time when we're gonna deal with this, is they're gonna want the town to take over their road. So if they get we're satisfied with legal sufficiency. Or if the town votes not to take over the road. What's it really matter to us? We've already put it through all
Right, yeah, no, really doesn't.
Right,
It really doesn't.
the. So,
right.
Yeah, that's fine the way it is.
Yeah, Craig, I mean, that's right. What he says is this is typically done after the subdivision approval. So,
Right.
Correct.
all right. Moving on to page 43. Actually, top of page 40, or bottom of page 42.
Isn't that language to deal with in part things like assuming a public water system comes to pass, that there's adequate capability to service a subdivision?
That's what I was thinking, George, when I read this earlier. And I was thinking about that exactly.
Admittedly, it's a little on the wordy side, but
Mhm.
I certainly can understand his comment that it's not clear.
Right. Seemed
Many
like-
other things that typically, might fall under this is, whether there's adequate capability in the school system. That's not an issue here, but has been elsewhere, solid waste. Are typically the issues that come up in areas that are expanding quickly.
So in answer to his question, I don't know that it has to do with road maintenance, but I was thinking about, like, if you had a infrastructure thing that was expanding with, or if there was an infrastructure thing that was to receive whatever subdivision is there capacity at that thing to receive it, right?
So this, well, the way that it's written includes everything, even road maintenance, doesn't it? So it includes, if we had a water system, if we had a sewage
Sure,
system,
yeah.
it includes everything.
Yeah.
Everything,
So
everything.
road maintenance, so whatever could possibly. See. the problem with it, so
Yeah.
just wanna change some wording.
Maybe the way to answer his question, I think the intent was to help protect the town. So if there's a clearer way to say that, maybe that should be suggested, but at this point, I think we're okay with it as is.
Well, I thought when I read it, I thought what he was trying to think here is things that are within the need of the subdivision versus things that are services to the subdivision. That's what I couldn't make it understanding why he would mention that. But that's what I got out of his comment. For instance, trash removal. And this has happened in cities, actually. So,
The subdivisions that have been developed in Belgrade to date have been relatively modest in size. And when I read this language, it reminds me of Gary Fuller's story about a subdivision proposed in Sydney of 100 lots. That's when these kinds of issues come up, not subdivision like the size of yours.
I do like the idea of using, if we keep the language as is or whatever, that the term phases instead of sections. It makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
Moving on to page 45.
Oh, that's where I got it.
Makes sense.
Yep, CEOs.
Now, I wonder in paragraph 2 there. It says deposit with the municipal officers a check for the amount of 2%. He suggests that should be to the code enforcement officer or the town manager. When it comes to code enforcement fees, it's typically our town clerk who
Right.
accepts those. So I would suggest making that town clerk versus the code enforcement officer or the town manager.
Okay.
Yep. And we're all in agreement that the third comment should be the CEO too. On 45.
Yeah.
now can I make a comment about that?
Yep.
As things to change. Possibly when we say municipal officer, it might be that now the fees are collected by the clerk, but who knows who's gonna collect
Well, the
it?
municipal officers are the select board, so we know that they're not definitely going to be.
Oh, I
municipal.
see. I thought that term means to people that work here.
No, so we are the municipal officials, but the select board are the municipal officers.
Okay, So then should the term read municipal official?
Well, I don't think so, simply because that would entail any town employee. I think we want that going to a specific town employee.
Sure.
And so our clerks generally collect all the fees
Yeah.
that we receive, and so I think that's the appropriate place.
Well, and that's typical in all town offices,
Yeah.
municipalities.
Yeah.
Personal.
It was just right, I guess I'm getting in tune with terms, local
No,
terms.
I understand, sir. I'm the
Yeah,
same way.
good.
I was not trying to challenge your decision into that. I was just trying to understand how the whole thing worked. Thank you. So we're on page 47 now.
Yes.
Yes.
I actually prefer the language that's there now over his suggestion. Because it deals with the issue earlier in the process prior to somebody purchasing a lot and applying for the building permit. This is really a consumer protection measure. And if you have a, less than reputable developer that, they could be applying for a permit on a house that they're not going to be able to build. And by that time, they've already bought the lot. They should know in advance before they buy the lot that the road's already constructed. At least, past their lot. They have to be fully constructed.
So George, you're suggesting that on 47, we just keep the language that we have?
Yes.
I'm good with that.
You are right, that this thing is a consumer protection
Yeah,
thing.
I like what he has to say, because sometimes they do pre-sell lots to finance the whole thing. Well, not the whole thing, but a portion of it.
Craig, when that happens, is there like something in the sales agreement or something that the road will be constructed before the sale is complete, or how do they do that?
There must be, but that's not the way it went with mine, so I don't know firsthand. So, on one hand, we're not into consumer protection stuff either.
It's an
I'm not
interest.
gonna argue on it, so if you guys are all set with it. then-
Okay.
I have no opinion on it.
So that takes us to page 56.
About one more thing back there.
Yeah.
So say you're at the top of the subdivision. And put a nice house up and you're still in the process, you got the road beyond there. And then you have someone drive by and see that house. Oh, this is gonna be nice. Can I buy a lot? So they're not gonna be able to buy a lot without that road being completed another 100 feet. Another 200 feet, it would have to be 200 feet. So you could line houses up as you're going down through,
And the,
because I know Tyler's got several houses out in front of him. He's got the road in place because he bought everything in place.
Right.
But if he was just starting out from scratch, he may not have the whole road in.
and also, just on that issue of, the town attorney mentioned people reusing the sale of the lot to finance
The building. of
the
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 road.
building.
beyond what he's doing. I can understand that. either torn one way or another. but
Yeah.
I do understand that,
Mhm.
you know, building a subdivision isn't cheap.
Right, and building a road is not inexpensive
They need
either.
the sale of that lot to be able to continue going down.
Yeah, and they can't get a building permit. I mean,
Yeah.
I see where you're coming to protect the consumer, but that's
Hmm.
really not our job.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, the history of town regulation of subdivisions back in the seventies this issue, this very issue is what was the reason why the legislature enacted authority for towns to regulate subdivisions, because people were buying lots in subdivisions that never got built.
Hmm.
The infrastructure never got built. I understand your point, Craig, and, you know, things have changed since the seventies, so, you know, I don't really, I don't feel strongly one way or the other, actually, is when it comes right down to it. Because in the fact of the matter is, what's gonna happen if the developer never, if you know, somebody buys a lot from the developer and they, worst case scenario, and they run off to Las Vegas, blow it all, rather than build the road. It'll end up in court. And, you know, maybe the lot owner will get their money back, maybe they won't, but maybe that's not the town's concern.
So with the town, go ahead,
I was
Rich.
gonna say, I kind of leaning toward the issue of siding on with the town attorney with this. thoughts.
Kind of where I'm leaning towards too.
Well, it's interesting. It's an interesting dilemma. I just, in good business, a good developer somehow will figure out to comply with this mandate of having the
This isn't
road.
focused at a reputable developer, this is focused at an irreputable developer, or somebody that
You figure out how to get the
doesn't
money.
have adequate capital.
Yeah,
They may be reputable, but they just have to have inadequate capital. I mean,
actually, well, I would say myself, I would say I was staying with what the wording is.
I mean, the rest of the ordinance isn't about consumer protection. You know, it's really this, and I don't know if there's anything else in it. This is really the only thing. And, you know, like I said, this isn't the 1970s anymore. So I'm okay either way. I certainly understand Craig's point and Rich's point.
Is there any way we can do like a middle way with both, you know, that to allow what the attorney is looking for, if we have a provision to either go either way while keeping both? I mean, I don't have enough.
Yeah, it's two different, it's totally opposite.
Yeah,
So I don't know enough.
because then you get into pretty convoluted language, you know. Well, if the road's been completed within 200 feet of the lot, you can do it, but if it's, you know, hasn't, you can't, you know,
Yeah.
it just. I would suggest we accept one or the other.
So Craig, I'm listening to what you're saying, you know, where sometimes it might be good for the developer that if they sold a lot, they could afford to help build a street that's gonna service that thing. So would the town attorney's comment and his suggestion fit what you're saying?
Yes,
It would?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm leaning towards what he's saying.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. So the town may want to change this provision to prohibit the issuance of a building permit for a lot until the street is completed.
But they can still pre-sell. So there was 6 houses, 6 lots in there. Sell 2 or 3 of them.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. Rich, are you okay?
I'm like this, town attorney's over here, our ordinance, is the way it's written is here, and I'm kind of like, fall
Yeah.
this way.
Okay,
I'm doing the same thing with the other way. That's interesting.
Okay, so how about this language then? It says, to change that person is to simply say, no building permit for a lot shall be issued until the street is completed. And then if you go to the second sentence, no unit in a multifamily development shall be occupied for the street. So no building permit for a lot shall be issued until the street is completed.
I think we were talking about going the other way.
No, but
No, this is what.
this
the
is
attorney-
building,
This is what the attorney is saying. So we're talking
Right.
about the building permit.
a building, not about the lot then, not talking about this, the selling of the
Oh, okay,
lot.
versus sale.
So that actually,
Yeah, versus a lot cannot be sold until the street is complete.
right.
that actually then will satisfy both ways.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah. That actually will satisfy both ways.
I can live with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, likewise.
Taking out maybe sold leased or.
Yeah, it's just simply going to say, no building permit for a lot shall be issued until the street is completed.
So we're just taking out the, yeah, exactly.
So you can sell the lot, you just need to get a building permit for it. until the street's done.
So that gives an incentive if you.
You
Wanna-
hard to build without a road.
Yeah,
Oh, God.
a little tough.
Building a lean to.
That was pretty good. Thank you.
All right, now we're to page 56.
Woo-hoo. Almost there,
Progress
guys.
Now,
Would it be more clear if we said areas within 250 feet horizontal distance of the following areas?
yeah, it looks like some language got dropped or something.
Yeah.
It was intended to require 250-foot buffer, of course.
Right.
I know the language in shoreline zoning is areas within 250 feet horizontal distance of.
I really like that, being consistent with that language.
So simply add the words areas within before 250 feet, Rich.
Yeah,
Okay.
By the horizontal distance, and then you go straight up and then measure
pardon me.
horizontal distance.
Yeah, in other words, you go up a hill.
Yeah, you go straight up and then measure over.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Yep.
Yeah,
I would probably also, what are areas within 250 feet, comma, horizontal distance, comma, of the following, get rid of the first of.
Okay.
So then have we addressed his comment sufficiently? I think so. Okay, to move on. Oh, yeah, that's right.
This isn't exactly, it is somewhat redundant, but it's not totally redundant for shoreline zoning. Yeah. This here says, for example, within a strip of land extending 100 feet inland from the normal high water line of a great pond or any tributary to a great pond. Well, put it this way. Shoreline zoning ordinance, within the shoreline zone of the tributary going through the shoreline zone is 75 feet. So there's a little bit of inconsistency here, and I don't know if we want to just make it just consistent with the shoreline zoning ordinance or just allow the little bit of inconsistency to remain.
What's the best reason to allow inconsistency in this case?
I don't know if there is a real good reason other than well, in some cases, a tributary to a great pond is a river, and then it is 100 feet. And either I could come up with a language to make this directly consistent with shoreline zoning, or we can allow the inconsistency.
Would another option be just to like delete 2 and 3 and to let it be regulated entirely just under shoreline zoning? Because they'd have to get a shoreline zoning permit if they were proposing any
Yeah.
of those things.
Right,
The only thing is if it's a small enough stream that it's not in the shoreline zone, do we care? But even the NRPA, Natural Resources Protection Act, state rule, doesn't allow people to wipe out
right.
the area within 75 feet. It's like that Tyler Evans site visit we made. You were
Yes.
there.
Yes.
Yeah, I did determine that was a stream.
Mhm.
So they're gonna have to stay back 75 feet from that, not because of town regulation, but because of DEP regulation.
Right, Miracle.
So, George's point is well taken. If it's in the shoreline zone, regulate in the shoreline zone. If it's outside the shoreline zone, and there are regulations, which there are on the state level, let them
Yep.
come into play.
Yeah, because I mean, this is conditioned on it being under shoreline zoning, 2 is. And as is 3.
Right,
In our shoreline zoning doesn't protect streams like in Tyler Evans subdivision.
so what's the best way to address that here? If we eliminate 2 and 3, and point to shoreline zone or state regulations that apply, something along those lines, is that what we do?
One thing is number 3 goes beyond the shoreline zone. Says areas, within areas subject to the state mandated shoreline zone, beyond the buffer strip designated above. Oh, and out to 250 feet, never mind.
So that is, right?
Yeah, I think we can get rid of 2 and 3.
Well, as Peter was saying, if we're gonna omit those, should we put just the number 2 to include something to the effect of if it doesn't fall under our shoreline zoning to refer to state, something like that?
I think,
Kind of sounds
Alert-
like what
alert
you're
people.
saying.
yeah, something like that. That way we have at least,
So it covers
Something-
our butt both ways, you know?
Yeah.
I think that would just make sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think that would be good to tie the 2 together.
and before we leave this, are there any unintended consequences that we're not thinking of?
Probably.
Yeah, probably. Okay, all right, probably. Good answer, good answer. Next. Anthony, did that make sense?
It does, but I need some language here. I need some help with some language.
Do we want to do it as a note or as a,
Well, one of the things about a note now, isn't a note not enforceable?
That's correct.
Right,
yeah,
right,
It's just advisory.
right. And we want this to be enforceable.
I mean, it's enforceable under shoreline zoning.
Yeah.
The question is, do you need a shoreline zoning rule and a shoreline zoning rule in the subdivision ordinance, or do you know that there is shoreline zoning ordinance covering clearing and vegetation? Or are we gonna stick to clearing and standards in here, which we're doing, we're taking it out. But I'm thinking that I know it is unenforceable, but the shoreline zoning ordinance isn't. So if you're saying beware, I'm not using that word even, beware, the shoreline zoning ordinance is applicable to areas within 250 feet, whatever, so that people know they gotta go to the shoreline zoning ordinance if they're in these
Well,
areas.
that's the thing, that if you have a sub-ordinance that is in this area, you have to comply with two ordinances.
Yeah.
So that's somehow they have to be smack right here. You have to comply with both ordinances.
How
What
about,
people think about.
how about this? I mean, this seems kind of redundant, but a subdivision or portion thereof in the shoreline zone shall comply with the provisions of that ordinance.
Yeah, perfect.
You're gonna have to say that a little
Well,
slower.
yeah, I was looking for reaction.
Yeah.
Right, like,
You got one
Yeah.
from Sarah.
Okay, a subdivision or portion thereof in the shoreland zone, capitalized shoreland zone, shall comply with the provisions of that ordinance.
So that's, pretty-
It's a local ordinance, but it's required by the state.
Right, well, we were gonna put number two, when we're gonna say if it wasn't covered by local shoreline ordinance, to refer to the state ordinance.
about, that was like the NERPA thing. Remember that example? Like,
Oh, okay.
remember, because
Well, we could add that too.
And the provisions of the natural resource protection.
Yeah, yeah. So number three could be, what, any, clearing or development. And 75 feet. of a- Do we have a definition of stream in here?
We have a definition of, I don't know if we do, but I was thinking river, stream, or brook.
I think there's definition in our local ordinance. for-
Yeah, in shoreline, but. um, Can't remember if we have a definition of stream. I only asked. Yeah, river, stream, or brook is defined. So how about this? Any clearing or development within 75 feet of a river, stream, or brook shall comply with the State Natural Resources Protection Act. That would be number three. Replace number three.
so if we do that, I like that. Then we have reference to both the shoreline zoning ordinance and the Natural Resource Protection Act
Right.
in these cases. I think that's good.
Want me to read that again, Anthony?
I think I got it. Let me read it back to you. Any clearing or development within 75 feet of a river, stream, or brook shall comply with the state natural resource protection.
Yep.
Go down to the bottom of page 58.
Open spaces.
I'm sure that was in my covenants.
You did make sure that they were?
When the engineer was designing it. I had to dedicate so many acres percentage.
Yep.
And I'm pretty sure that's in the covenants.
So that would be in line with what the town's attorney's comments would be, right?
Yeah.
So
I
so
mean,
if
he's
we-
doing the same thing, basically, but he's just asking for covenants as well.
Yeah.
Covenants.
So he's saying if the intent is to do what we just said, then the town should require a covenant on the deed to this effect. So if that were the case,
We will side with his comment, yes.
so do we need to change any wording in what we have so far?
No, I think it will be addition to it, isn't it?
Sure. So what do you got for a suggestion? For wording to,
So, say, a covenant on the deed to this effect will be required.
So maybe after the word prohibited, just comma, and a covenant on the deed to this effect
Will be required,
will be, or will be required.
yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
way to
Oh,
go,
oh,
way to
wait,
go. Good job.
We're done, huh? No,
We're a third of the way through.
No, more than that.
Peter, come on.
I think we're done.
Last 6 pages.
Yeah, we're on page, God, 89.
Holy schmoly.
Yeah.
Holy moly.
He got tired of reading when he got.
Well, this one's a big one, though. This one is a huge one. We gotta give some love thought to this.
What page did we get to?
89.
A duplicative with the street design standards in the previous article, or if not, should be moved up to the article. Oh, okay. Street design standards. Okay. So is he suggesting that this subject should be all in the previous article, which would be,
Number 8.
So. So a large part, his comment is correct. The first paragraph on page, under number 2, street design standards, 80, on page 88. That first paragraph A is done with a paragraph on paragraph little IV on page 76. B is redundant with paragraph 2 on page 70. And then, and the latter part of B actually conflicts with the standards in table 15.3 on page 85. So that probably should be eliminated as well.
for sure.
So George, are you saying delete all paragraphs A and B?
Yes. Thank you. I was just laying it out there for the other board members, so.
Thank you for the comparison, because
The only other thing is that, in my mind, the person that's going through this will be a benefit to the applicant to have all this in one section all compressed together rather than separate. I don't know. I have no idea.
Well, I think would be to benefit to everybody, ourselves and the applicant, not to have it repeated.
right,
And particularly in the part of paragraph B where it conflicts with standards elsewhere in the ordinance.
right.
Okay.
with regard to paragraph C,
Turnaround.
I think that probably could be moved. That's not redundant. I'll get back to that in a minute. Paragraph D could be eliminated as well. It conflicts with the site distances required in table 15-1. And C could be moved to page 78. So, in summary, I think he's correct. A, B, and D are redundant with other portions of the ordinance.
Mhm.
And C, which is not redundant, could be moved to page 78. What's that?
That is helpful.
To see, there's a section there, 12, little 12,
Yeah.
dead end streets.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I did.
That could be added in there somewhere.
yep.
Doesn't matter where.
I didn't get that one.
It's right around where they're talking about the turnaround, right?
You could just add it to the first, make it the first sentence.
Yeah,
Yeah, that should work very good. Well, thank you, George. I didn't know what to do with that. It was a long time. I didn't know. what to
Well,
do
I
with that.
I resisted as much as I could, but eventually I realized I was either gonna deal with it or not.
Yeah, I suit myself to the fact, well, maybe they need it all together there, so I'm not gonna put time into it.
so I have a question then. So that is under, all the stuff we're talking about is under 2, which is called street design standards, right? And most of 2 goes away or is moved or somewhere else, right?
Right,
So if 2 goes away from this part,
have to renumber.
not only renumber, but my question would be, do we retitle? Because it says Article 14, street and storm drainage design and construction standards. We're basically taking out reference to street design standards in this article, at least at that higher level.
Yeah, you're right, that leaves you with what was 3, which is all stormwater related to roads.
Yep. We have general requirements.
And soil erosion. Yeah, in the general requirements is still some street stuff.
Okay,
The whole business with the road designs is bizarre as far as I'm concerned,
yeah. It is.
in the model ordinance and consequently here.
And so I don't want to make a mountain out of a
Yeah,
molehill.
neither do I, not at this point.
We can keep it just as is, knowing that there's reference to general requirements. There's some reference to some street standards, even in general there. And then,
Would it be worth it to say, see, if I be a developer, I'll be looking for that street design standards. That's why I was thinking that keeping it there, even when it was redundant, might help the people doing work and figuring their way around the ordinance. So I don't know if we should put leave number 2 and say, go to page so and such for reference. But all this stuff is divided in different pages now. I don't know, I was thinking about the applicant and.
Right.
They're, and people that do, I don't know how this. Greg will fill in how developers go about this thing when they go about that, maybe it doesn't matter.
let me just suggest this. If we wanted to change something here and retitle this Article 15, could we say general requirements, comma,
or just call this, it's storm drainage design and construction, take the street out.
I am totally agreeing to take the street out. It just seems weird to me, you say, street and storm drainage, blah, 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 and then the first thing you see is general requirements,
Yeah,
and we're taking out street design standards. So I'm just looking for a way to make it logical, so general person reading this would know what they're talking about. I can live with it and just keep it, but
Is there enough in paragraph B to warrant keeping streets in the paragraph?
I mean, what number one has that deals with roads has to do more with what should be submitted. That's a number two. And in B, I mean, 1B. And then 1A is really more about, you know, the final plan. Approval of the final plan doesn't mean that the town accepts the road.
mhm.
Hmm,
I don't know. We can just leave it
I
as
don't have a
is,
good quick solution.
and
yeah,
we can leave it as is, that's
yeah,
fine,
sure.
Uh,
that's fine. No problem at all. Next,
So we have to relabel all those numbers though, the number 3 is gonna be number
Don't
2.
worry, I'll fix it.
That's
Thank
easy.
you.
91, 92,
Thank
are we
you.
good? Two more?
Yeah, almost done here. So we're on page 91, huh?
Oh, yeah, this is our favorite topic.
So how much would be required to be put into an escrow?
In that first paragraph, it says adequate to cover total construction costs of all required improvements, taking into account the time span of the construction schedule and inflation.
So you gotta put all the money up front, and then so you have to have double the money to build a subdivision. So it's not only that you have the money, but if you have to put an escrow for that amount of money, so now you're doubling it. So no one like me can build a subdivision.
Can you,
Well,
can you wind up again, that again?
So with what it says in the front,
Yeah,
top,
yeah,
that you need to put in escrow, cover the amount of the cost of the subdivision. So if you have to put it in escrow,
well, can you explain what an escrow is again, what it actually does?
the escrow is money
Yeah.
held by the town,
Yeah, okay,
and it would be returned eventually.
Essentially, you would have to, let's say the subdivision's gonna cost $1 million.
yeah,
Craig would have to provide $1 million cash that would sit in an
An
account.
escrow account,
okay,
and then I still have to come up with $1 million to build the subdivision.
gotcha.
Are you suggesting, Greg, that it should be a percentage in escrow?
Well, let me ask another question. The letter of credit.
That's, that's manageable, yes. That would be. Manageable. But we also need to bring up this, pay attention to this performance bond from the solar firms too.
Yeah, and I think that was something we discussed during the decommissioning.
But a
discussion.
letter of credit. What else is it called? So he says, an escrow or a letter of credit.
So if we went with an letter of credit, an irrevocable letter of credit. Could we do what he suggests and just delete performance bond? And yeah, just delete B. And then at that point, there's no reference to escrow account, is it? Oh, yes,
Yeah,
it's
they're
in A.
Anthony,
But-
do you have any insight into the underlying problems that apparently other municipalities have had with performance
I do not.
bonds? I mean, those were, when we did contracting, those were our go-to financial assurance mechanism, to make sure the contractor finished the work. And it always worked fine, but I don't understand this context. We being DEP.
So let me ask this, who will issue a letter of credit? If a bank that you have been a client with for a long time,
They're vouching for it.
yeah.
Yeah, see, in the solid waste and hazardous waste world, the letter of credit was viewed as the weak financial assurance mechanism.
As a week,
Yeah,
why?
because the state got stiffed a number of times by some of the paper companies. But that's all they had for financial assurance. That's why the state of Maine owns the Dolby landfill up in East Millinocket and the West Old Town landfill, both of which used to be owned by
Interesting,
paper mills.
interesting.
So the way it happened with me is my father took the line of credit. And I was taking the loans out to build the houses.
Okay. And were you both the applicant?
No. Father was-
You were the applicant.
My father was.
Oh, father was. Oh, well, that,
I think, I don't
that
know.
would,
Actually,
that wouldn't be a problem the way this is written in. As long as the applicant that's getting providing the financial assurance. I mean, our only recourse and the only person we're regulating is the applicant.
I can't remember actually, it's so long ago now, I don't know if I was on the applicant or if it's just my father.
So maybe the lawyer doesn't know what you know.
Well, or it's different in this arena than the arena I worked in for most, for a substantial period of time. So
Yeah, I mean.
I don't pretend to,
Yeah, I mean.
I
he's
mean,
speaking-
my inclination is to defer to the town attorney on
Yeah,
this.
he
but
speaks to municipalities, which is his area of expertise.
Yeah,
So he is talking about getting rid of the performance bond thing.
Who issues the performance bond? Is that a bank thing too?
Bonding company.
on the company, but they're
So,
through an insurance company.
so Craig, do you think that by eliminating that, as long as we have escrow and letter of credit, letter of credit may be more doable for some developers than the escrow would be, but the town is sort of protected with both of those instruments? Do you think that that's a fair compromise?
So you'd still need to establish an escrow.
No, no.
No, you can either or.
The escrow or the letter of credit.
Yeah, I would go with what the attorney recommends.
Okay.
That's where I'd go.
I have a hard time believing anybody would go the route of an escrow,
Right, exactly.
even under all three options. Why would anybody go the route of an escrow?
Well, let's say you have a poor credit and you inherit a bunch of money. That's cash.
Yeah, I just,
That'd be the only time.
That was the only time.
Or you need to hide some money because of something.
Yeah, well, do you want a laundry money? Probably, I don't know.
Okay. So based on that logic, we get rid of paragraph B and follow the advice of the town's attorney. On 92,
And
do
so we
we,
would get rid of paragraph 4 as well.
I would say so.
right,
Are people in agreement with that?
I'm sorry, just for the correction, I was putting a joke about the laundry money. It's not a real thing.
Understood.
Well, this is public.
Yes. See that one on the next page, Craig?
Yeah, so what about, on the establishment of an escrow account? Oh, that can stay in there because you can choose either or.
Yeah, yes,
Correct.
yes, yeah, yeah.
I think we're on page 95, Anthony.
Yeah.
So we just getting rid of that whole section since it's covered by the appeals ordinance.
Yeah. Well, and that appeals go directly to Superior Court. They don't even go to the appeals. Court.
Strike it,
Yeah, real good for that. And I think-
right? Get rid of it.
Yeah, yeah. Get rid of it, and we're done.
My memory's faded. Was there some specific reason why that's there? I mean, did we intend it to be there for some reason that I'm not recalling? Or is that just an oversight on our part?
It could,
Yeah.
Well, that's
Charles'
oversight
part.
on our part, not catching, oh geez, the Board of Appeals ordinance is the Board of Appeals. It's like adding something that wasn't necessary.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's what I assumed, but I just,
All right.
all
What
right.
I'll do is I'll make these changes tomorrow, I'll send everyone to you guys. Even at your leisure, and then just with the changes, we'll need to take this back to the select board for their approval on February the 1st. Everyone's invited.
All right, cool. Thank you, Anthony. Really appreciate it. Our next order of business is to attend to the minutes, I believe, from January 6th. Does everybody have them?
do.
Okay,
No,
I just happened to think about this, sorry about this, so. Is there any reason why beyond the escrow and the letter of credit, we will not add also as a third option, the bond, the performance bond? Is any drawback to do that?
To the performance bond?
Well, to have the three options available.
Yes, because if someone chooses the performance bond and then the town's not able to draw off that bond, then as George mentioned, we get stiffed.
I see,
so that's a consequence of that mechanism,
gotcha.
which I didn't know fully
Apparently,
until,
it's not as reliable of a financial tool as it once was, for whatever reason. I'll follow up with Bill just to ask.
Yeah.
You can provide a little context for that, just for our information.
Yeah,
it's good to hear what we've learned, so.
yeah.
Thank you.
Anthony, you need to lock up. Yes, please.
I mean, among other things that could have changed is there could have been some court cases that undermined that as a tool.
Oh, really?
No, I'm saying that it could have been.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know a blessed thing, actually.
Okay, has everybody had a chance to review the minutes? Are there any edits or suggested edits? Comments?
One thing, I guess I've changed the DEP best wastewater practices to DEP best stormwater,
Management?
best management practices.
Yep, good point. It's under B, shoreland application, first page. Great, thank you. Anything else, Rich?
Right off now.
Anybody else have anything? Go ahead, George.
First off, a question. The opening line, this meeting was conducted in person with 2 planning board members on Zoom. I was just thinking if the select board saw that, it might be helpful to have some explanation of why. And so I was thinking maybe after Zoom adding due to being ill, in case they raise a
Sure.
question about their policy
Mhm.
or conformance with their policy.
Mhm. May I ask this? Is it, the way it's stated now, does it seem like we don't have a quorum? The meeting was conducted in person with 2 planning board members on Zoom.
Well, it does say who's present. It includes,
Okay.
Craig and Rich.
Yep. Okay,
So hopefully that would not be an issue, but
okay, good.
And me, I was there.
Yes, you were, and you're mentioned right there. Sarah Langet.
right, and you. And me
Mhm,
and Peter.
mhm.
On the second page, under new business, A, shoreland opinion. Under purpose, I'm not sure that's right. I was thinking it should be changed to proposed division of existing non-conforming parcel into 2 lots.
I like that.
It was already non-conforming, right?
Correct.
And deleting, making them non-conforming. And then I thought more specifics and explanation was needed in the next paragraph, the bold paragraph, as to the reason for our approval and the motion. Let's see, on the second line at the end of that first sentence, at this time, I would suggest adding due to meeting the state minimum lot size law and state septic regulations.
Right, because those are 2 big topics that we
Those were
talked
the 2
about.
criteria.
Yeah.
And then lastly, under B, well, it's not really B, it's the second to last, right before we adjourned, Craig mentioned the possibility of brewery in the woods. I'm not gonna deal with that part, but after some discussion, the planning board does not see an issue. I think what we concluded is, or noted is it may require approval under the commercial development review ordinance.
I think that was our discussion. Yeah, Yeah.
Depending on the facts.
right. And because we did discuss that this was just sort of a discussion and we had no detail to go by.
Right.
So,
So,
When I told them that, so it may require it.
yeah.
good enough. Okay,
That's all I got.
all right. Thanks. Sarah, did you have anything? Craig, did you have anything?
Can I
Sure,
get in still after?
absolutely. Because I was going to go to something I thought for sure you were going to mention.
Like the George mentioned on number 2, new business shoreline opinion, may also be worth putting in, noting that there are 2 residential dwelling units on the lot.
Mhm.
Currently,
Pardon me, currently.
currently. Mhm. Good point.
Which
So yes, we
is a
should.
big issue when considering what we did or what we said they could do with a
Mhm, mhm.
non-issue.
So like after the word parcel, Rich, add something like with 2 dwelling units.
Yes,
Want to add septics as well, there's 2 septics.
yeah, two, there should maybe two structures,
For structures.
dwelling units. Somehow get the idea that there's 2 structures on the lot, and that's a big issue. If it was only 1 structure, we wouldn't allow it.
Right.
And if it was a apartment building with 2 residential dwelling units, I don't think we would.
There actually were 3 structures because it was a bunkhouse too.
Yeah, although that's staying with me, but anyway.
Yeah.
I just think it's important that we know that, and that's not a residential dwelling unit, so say with two separate. Two different buildings.
Or 2 primary,
Oh, that could
structures,
work.
2 primary residential.
Yep.
dwelling units.
yeah, so after the word parcel with 2 primary,
Residential structures.
Yes.
residential structures.
So a quick comment.
For Julie's benefit.
So a quick comment, George, because I think Craig mentioned just a minute ago that there were 2 septic systems,
Oh,
right?
okay,
Because that was also part of the discussion, right?
right, it was.
So could we say, how does this say, 2?
So right now we got a proposed division of existing non-conforming parcel into 2 lots with 2 primary residences.
Each serviced by a septic system?
Yes,
A septic.
each serviced by a septic system.
Its own separate.
So-
By its own.
So for Julie's
Or is it a-
purposes. Go ahead, Rich.
No, I was gonna say, I kept thinking back, is it 2 septic systems? Okay, 2 different.
Yeah, they each had their own
Yeah.
system. Yeah, no, that's correct.
So I thought, what I think I said was maybe put the word in here, 2 separate
Mhm.
2 separate.
septic systems.
Okay,
uh, The way you worded, Peter, read like this. Proposed division, well, I'll just read the whole thing. Proposed division of existing non-conforming parcel with 2 primary residential structures, each with its own septic system into 2 lots.
that will work.
What can we talk about Aaron driveways? So we gotta have something else.
You can work on that.
Yeah. Then I don't have anything else to add other than a question, and now I thought you were gonna bring up, Rich, actually, was on the list of attendees. There were 2 question marks where people had only first names listed. I don't have the answers to who the last names were for those people. But typically for the record, we try to get the complete name,
Yeah,
so I have no suggestions. but-
yeah. I'm sure that's one of those deals that Julie's encountered before where then all that shows up on the screen or on Zoom is the first name.
Yeah, exactly.
And people don't never speak, so they don't identify themselves.
So is there anything left to talk about? I want to ask Richard one thing before we head out. It's 9:15.
Oh, we have to make a motion to approve the minutes. maybe?
Oh, we do. Yes, we do. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes, Sarah Langett.
Yeah, I second it.
Are you making that motion?
And I'm going down. I'm making a motion to approve the minutes of January 6. With a motion for it.
As amended?
As amended, yes, I'm sorry.
So there's a motion. We have a second?
I second it.
Okay, any more
I gotta
discussion?
do something tonight.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Any more discussion? All those in favor, so roll call, Craig,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes,
George,
Yes.
Rich,
Yes.
and I too am in favor, 5 in favor, none opposed. Minutes approved, thank you very much. I want to make sure to get to Richard. How has it been going?
Good.
Good?
Yeah, we talked a little bit in the hall, but.
Yeah.
It's going well. It seems like there's more and more stuff going up now. So it's like kind of getting the feel for what something's gonna be like. It's not that fast probably yet. Yeah, there's quite a bit still going on in the community, so.
Yeah.
Lots to learn. Places being bought up,
Yeah,
so.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
good. Thank you. I hope it goes well. Have you found out any news for activities that we need to know about? And it's okay if it's not, if the answer is no. I just, typically this is an opportunity to talk
I've
about
been
it.
to a couple of residences. I mentioned the Boston police officers buying place down Pickham's Cove. We wanted to raise it up. Just like the two adjacent structures are raised up. But he's looking down the road, so it's kind of, he's want information. Then there's a gentleman doing a huge plumbing job downtown, 3 or 4 days on the left there. My goodness. Alan LaBelle's doing that.
Oh, yeah, I know, Alan. Yeah,
So much plumbing in there, so it's a good place to go check it.
cool.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I haven't been a wanderer too much.
Okay, all right,
Yeah, so far so good. to answer your question.
great, awesome.
Excellent.
Any other town news?
Let's get out of this town.
I know, we got.
No distilleries in the woods or anything? Greg, that you know about?
No, that's why I want to get out of this town. Litchfield.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
I remember.
All right,
That's the way to
So-
go.
so if nothing else,
I'm gonna put a
Yeah.
motion to adjourn.
second, any more discussion? All those in favor?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
All of us are in favor. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, 9:20. So I'm going to end the meeting.
Yeah.